Knights of the Old Republic 1 versus Knights of the Old Republic 2. Although this is an old discussion, as old as KOTOR 2 is, 12 years to be exact, I definitely feel like it's still a heated one, and one that I figured I should cover since I have been covering KOTOR lately. Which KOTOR is better, KOTOR 1 or KOTOR 2? I have a few categories that I will be using for my future reviews, and I will take you through these same categories in this video. Categories are graphics, ambience, story, and gameplay. Graphics are vision-based things like textures, art styles, and the overall look of the game. Please note, I am not a graphics whore, so I will be focusing on things like actual art styles and some of the less flashy lens flare type stuff. Ambience is a combination of something like look and sound. Think of it as the feeling of the game, or the setting, how it makes you feel when you play it. The story would be things like the main plot, side plots, characters, and an overall complexity in writing and dialogue. Gameplay is the mechanics of what you actually play, the combat, character customization, and etc. Let's get into the first category, graphics. These are both early 2000 games, and as such there's not really anything revolutionary about either of them. KOTOR 1 has what I would call a sort of neutral color scheme. Each planet has its own look and feel, and some planets definitely have a light and even beautiful feature to them, but most planets have a kind of just neutral color scheme. Like if you look at the UI for example, it's a neutral blue. It's nothing too aggravating to the eyes, and nothing too dark and hard to see. KOTOR's art style is very Star Wars, which is both good and bad. A bit predictable in its design, and its age certainly hasn't done the game any good, especially if you look at things like models. KOTOR 2 has a more realistic model view than KOTOR 1, and the faces look much better put together. This could be due to age, of course, which I want you guys to pay attention to. The art in KOTOR 2 is dark, much like the story. It's not really pretty. I don't think anyone would use the word pretty to describe it, and definitely doesn't share the same light colors as KOTOR 1. Frankly speaking, the color scheme in KOTOR 2, even down to the UI, is dark, and even depressing in some cases. Even on lush green planets like Duxton or Dantooine, you still barely have any green scenery. The green is muted, it's not very bright. Perhaps KOTOR 2 wanted to make a statement with this art style, as it is very distinct, but I dislike when a game takes an art style and makes it overly one way or the other. It takes its art style and it uses it to kind of beat a theme or ambience into your head, to be like, you must think dark thoughts, you must be sad and depressed. That's kind of what I feel when I play KOTOR 2, which I don't mind it as much simply because I know that's the style of the game, but it's very polarizing. You either like it or you dislike it. I think showing dark colors is fine, but an overabundance of them can be tiring. Where KOTOR 2 shines is its darker planets like Nar Shaddaa and Korriban. It outperforms KOTOR 1 on Korriban for sure. This is a hard category to choose. I think KOTOR 2's models are much better, as I mentioned earlier, than KOTOR 1's, but I just dislike how blunt the coloring is for KOTOR 2. I think if you have to look at it aggregately, that's possibly a downside to it. I have to lean KOTOR 1, but just slightly. KOTOR 1 wins the graphics department. Ambience. To me, this category is not really close, or much debated. Although I previously trashed on the overuse of dark color schemes with KOTOR 2 just previously, it still makes for the most cohesive art project out of the two. Combined with the superior sound and music, KOTOR 2 makes you feel like you are in the universe, even if it's a dark and depressing one. When you play KOTOR 2, you feel like you are playing KOTOR 2. It's got a distinctive look and feel to it. The soundtrack is dark and foreboding in a way too. KOTOR 1 comes across as more generic in this respect. When you listen to the KOTOR 2 soundtrack, it provokes thought from you. When you mix it with the setting of the game, you can't help but just feel like, in certain scenarios, something bad is going to happen, or something bad did happen. Even places like the tombs on Korriban come across as borderline scary. So I have to give this category to KOTOR 2. KOTOR 2 wins the ambience category. The story. Now this category is probably the one that's the most debated, as the games have their biggest differences here. KOTOR 1 is the stereotypical amnesia protagonist trope where you are the great Revan, but you were captured and lost your memory. It ends up being a fight the Overlord Malak with his cheesy laugh and either deal revenge and take control of the Sith, or try and stabilize the Republic. It's very much a against the odds kind of plot. It's very predictable and has just about all tropes. The maniacal laughter in the villain, complete with the cape and breathing mask. Cough, Vader. The damsel in distress, at least she's a damsel when you have to rescue her at the end, as well as the wise sages who guide the way but warn of great danger afoot. Anakin. The most interesting part of the story in KOTOR 1, and frankly the one that changes the predictable plot a bit, is the journey to uncover all the star maps, which lead to the Star Forge, an automated shipyard designed to create the most powerful army of all time. It's cool how this runs parallel to the normal plot. KOTOR 2 has something like this as well, except it sheds the stereotypical Star Wars plot of good and evil and adds an entire layer to it. It goes from being a standard cake to the triple chocolate layered cake. KOTOR 2, as I spoke about in my previous video, is not about good and evil. It's about belief versus belief. It's about defining that area in between dark and light. Yes, you have your very much evil villains in the game. They're not the real threat at play. The Lord of Betrayal is pulling the strings behind the scenes, and she does so brilliantly with a smile on her face, and by the end you will likely have agreed with her to some extent, which is the beauty of the game. That's because the game is teaching you about the Force is more than just light and dark. It goes beyond that. Parallel story to the main plot is a more subtle one. It's the growth of you and your companions as characters. Now the characters in KOTOR 1 are rather dull and boring. Bastila, for example, although a rather revered character in the Star Wars universe, is mostly patronizing during the plot if you aren't a goody-goody two-shoes. Not to mention that she ironically falls to the dark side, which throws her whole act on its head. Mind you, in the lore, she's supposed to then become a Grey Jedi, much like Revan, but the books kind of messed that up. Candace Ordo and HK-47 are fun in a I will crush you meatbag kind of way, but they're also both in KOTOR 2 and have much more mature roles there. Mission, she's just very whiny and annoying, and Karth is the epitome of the we need to talk, but then says he doesn't want to talk about it. KOTOR 2 has its falls too, don't get me wrong, with characters like Disciple and Handmaiden being as exciting as rocks, though at least the Handmaiden has real relevance to the plot. Atton beats any KOTOR 1 character, and he's not even the best companion. Kreia is by leaps and bounds, and she crushes the entire cast of characters in both games. Now the villains, you have Malak, the cheesy laughter, who's hell-bent on destruction. Wait, that sounds familiar. Meanwhile, KOTOR 2 has an evil character who can feast on entire planets, and a guy who doesn't die, and then they have some villain who some would even hesitate to call a villain. A character ripe in subtlety, who puts the KOTOR 1 villains to shame. KOTOR 2 beats KOTOR 1 pretty handily in the villains category, though I have to add a caveat. The plot in KOTOR 2 is rather complicated to understand, and I would reckon it takes another playthrough or a careful playthrough to actually understand it. Not to mention the amount of cut content, which surely hamstrings it. Still, even without the mods that restore the content that was cut, its plot is much more mature and unique, and therefore I have to give KOTOR 2 the victory in this category. KOTOR 2 wins the category of story. Gameplay. Now this is a category KOTOR 2 frankly gets beat up in. Launched with a plethora of bugs that prevented you from even beating the game in some cases, and it had to have the help of mods to fix a lot of its problems, something KOTOR 1 didn't really suffer from. BioWare's version of KOTOR is much more stable than Obsidian's. KOTOR 1 has superior gameplay due to the fact that it does not suffer from any hitching or gameplay breaking bugs, though KOTOR 1's options of a playstyle are a bit more limited, since a Force-only playstyle isn't nearly as effective as it is in KOTOR 2, not to mention KOTOR 2 gets class specializations with added powers, but even then it lacks the polish that KOTOR 1 has. I think KOTOR 1 claims this category as being a mostly bug-free experience. KOTOR 1 wins gameplay category. In conclusion, it seems like these games ended up tying with each other. If you look at the categories, they both claim 2 each. If each category was given a single point, then this would be the case. However, since KOTOR 2 would barely win in graphics, and that's from a mostly subjective standpoint, that category isn't very helpful in determining the winner. Especially when graphics are a large reason, KOTOR 2 wins the Ambience category. The graphics in KOTOR 2 are better than KOTOR 1, that's not really debated, but the art style I feel can be a bit overdone at times, but that's likely due to it being a more polarizing than a neutral style. We know of KOTOR 2's bugged history, and how that and the unfinished mechanics make KOTOR 1 the better of the two in terms of gameplay. But where KOTOR 2 really pulls ahead as the best game in the series is in the story. The only thing really unique about the story in KOTOR 1 is your role as Revan specifically, and it being in the Star Wars universe. Characters that are both good and evil, or have been at one time, are a bit rare in video games, especially ones that you can actually play as. Although Revan is an interesting character, he's not one that you can really see develop in the same way that the Exile does in KOTOR 2. When I played KOTOR 2, my beliefs of Force and frankly life changed vastly. They were challenged by Kreia's assertions and made me discard previous beliefs I held dear about the Force and views on morality. KOTOR 2 is a thought-provoking game, and this is the reason why it can still be thought about and played today to the extent. But I've tried to go back and analyze the plot of KOTOR 1, but I always found myself losing motivation due to the fact that it's a rather simple plot that's pretty agreeable. Although KOTOR 1 is likely more palatable, for the masses, I think KOTOR 2 has the bigger cult following due to its unique take on the Star Wars universe. KOTOR 2 wins the battle of which game is better. Let me know if you guys disagree in the comments and tell me why. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I will be doing a Tyranny review video soon, which is a game by Obsidian, who are the makers of KOTOR 2, and it shares a lot of similarities with KOTOR 2. I'm loving it so far and I can't wait to show you guys more. Thanks for watching as always, nerdSlayer out.